Ukraine's fight in the international arena, that's what I mean. The main achievements since the beginning of a full-scale war, to your opinion, are?
This is primarily the formation of a grand coalition in support of Ukraine and a grand coalition in this war. This is the so-called Rammstein, in which there are more than 50 states, and of course the organized supply of weapons to Ukraine and diplomatic support. This is the basis of victory, unification of the world around Ukraine in this war.
Allied countries, which is providing most of assistance. I will clarify the folk here. Not what I mean is the amount of assistance itself matters, but also the ratio with GDP. Like Latvia, for example, the country is small, but in relation to others, they help Ukraine at more than 1.5% of GDP, which is a very significant figure.
Moreover, if we take, for example, the defense budget, then the same Latvia helped. More than 30% of its defense budget was sent to Ukraine for help. And for some types of weapons, for the same Stingers, Latvia transferred them all to Ukraine. This applies not only to Latvia, it applies to almost all the Baltic countries. Poland can also be added to this list because it understands the threat from the Russian Empire. It maximally supports Ukraine in this matter, unlike the so-called countries of old Europe, which I still have the feeling that they have not realized for themselves that they are in a new worldwide confrontation, the so-called return of the old Russian Empire against the new democratic free world. I think it's a matter of time before they understand. Well, of course, in this paradigm, we cannot add in this list the UK and the USA, which in percentage terms did not show such support as the Baltic countries and Poland, but nevertheless, in absolute numbers, we understand that without the support of London, Washington, it would quite difficult for us to withstand this war, starting from the spring 2022. And we hope that this support will not only continue on that level, it must increase, because there is no such concept of a truce, there is no concept of how to negotiate, how resolve it diplomatically. This war took on such a character that either there is Ukraine and the Western democratic world, either there is an empire and return to the confrontation of the middle of the 20th century.
Thank you very much for your answer. The most valuable aid for Ukraine from the entire flow of global aid, humanitarian, military, political, legal, financial. We, of course, understand that any help is important, but which one do you prioritize as a politician and as a person?
First of all, military. Without military support, financial and humanitarian support would not make sense, because in this case there would be no state of Ukraine, and in principle we would have nothing to discuss with you now. First of all, military, 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 and then everything else.
I agree to that, and aid to Ukraine needs to be increased and not reduced. Is there such an understanding among partners? Is there an understanding that Ukraine is protecting Europe and the values of the world community as such?
Henry, there is no such thing as the countries of Europe as a whole. That is, each country has its own vision of the situation, its own approach. Again, comparing the so-called countries of old Europe and new Europe, on the one hand, there is Germany, France, Italy. On the other hand, the countries of new Europe. There are Poland, the Baltic countries. On the one hand, all of them understand that it is necessary to support Ukraine. But in terms of the amount of support in percentage terms, what we have begun to talk about is completely different support, completely different visions. If Poland and the Baltic countries understand that they need to increase it, then the countries of Southern Europe or France, this realization comes to them quite hard. Moreover, if we talk not only about military support, the issue of information support and propaganda is very important for us in these countries, because the enemy uses hybrid methods of pressure, including influencing Western society. This applies primarily to France and Germany, and this undermines their resilience and undermines their ability to pursue their independent state policy at all. And here it is necessary to pay attention to Berlin and Paris, to the activation of the information front directly inside them.
Do we know what to do? What is the plan to convince Paris and Berlin in increasing the aid to Ukraine, not otherwise?
Of course we understand this. We tell them about how the spy network works, how Moscow's information network works in these countries, and try to explain that it needs to be practically closed. For example, Russia Today and Russia's propaganda networks in these countries should be closed. A lot depends on you and us. This includes the work of our embassies with local leaders, work with local publications, so that Berlin and Paris could assist us in promoting our information struggle, including the Freedom Channel directly in their space, their information policy and coordination, the exchange of information assets and intelligence exchange in this direction, and we are working. And in this case, we must practically pay tribute to both our Ukrainian armed force and Ambassador Andriy Melnik, who, let's say, using the example of Germany, showed how it works, how you can change your mind. And it is desirable that the entire Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine and the entire Polish line learn and promote this, and in other countries too. First of all, in France. This we, as I understand it, are very effective. There is another problem here, that we are trying to explain to Western Europe, London and Washington and Berlin, Paris, that we are dealing with the Russian Empire, which is on the last legs. This is what is happening now. This is its agony. This is the threshold of its collapse. And we are trying to explain to Western Europe that they will not be able to stop this disintegration like in 1991. It will happen whether they want it or not. And our task is to prepare for this together. And as part of this, we hold a large press conference in that 5 electronic referendums have already taken place. These are Königsberg, Ingria, Kuban, Siberia and the Urals. The result of the independence referendums was presented there. The program of achievement of result was presented. That people voted in electronic referendums. The program of subsequent independence referendums in other regions of Russia was also presented. And this press conference attracted a lot of attention from both the Western public and the media.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dunda, the Parliament member of Ukraine. Thank you for your time. Hope to see you soon on UATV channel here in Ukraine.